Welcome to Bootstraps #2 podcasting, and today we invited a new friend and a very interesting person, Danny Schaefer, to our broadcasting. Welcome to you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I met you about 2 weeks ago, I guess, and my life's totally changed since I met you.
A newfound direction. I
a
like
newfound direction. And I say that because there are a lot of very colorful people in the industry, both on both sides of the table. There are people that came from former lives of success, and there are people that started growing when they were 13. Where do you fit into the scheme of cannabis in your world?
Yeah, somewhere right there in the middle, to be honest. Yeah. We like floating in the middle, but yeah, growing up, experienced cannabis in high school and enjoyed it much more than alcohol, and keg stands as an example, and had my run-ins with minors in possession tickets and all that fun stuff. So kind of been through that side of the experience, but yeah, really saw the opportunity leaving corporate America for this growing industry, and decided to jump in head first.
When I first met you, I wasn't quite sure what your company did.
That's intentional, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's what I came to learn later. But
Yeah.
My 420 Tours. Tell me a little bit about your company.
Yeah, so it's the company name is actually Pioneer Industries, as we're really helping pioneer an industry. We've got a couple different trade names we operate. My 420 Tours is our year-round travel and tourism business. We also own World Cannabis Week, which functions very similar to the South by Southwest in and around Denver during the 420, call it New Year's celebration of legal cannabis. We also operate Hettys of State, which is a private, call it dinner party and event for C-level executives in the space. So pretty well diversified in that capacity, and then have some other varying interests through other partnerships. But for the most part, we like the experiential side of cannabis. And really helping, make the industry accessible, regardless of your interests. So whether it's a consumer that wants to, come to Colorado to consume in a hotel room, we do 420-friendly hotel accommodations with some pretty interesting national chains. Things like grow and dispensary tours, cooking classes, sushi, sake, joint rolling, kind of date night type experiences, wellness tours. Our main objective through the tour business is to again, make it accessible, and then provide a service that targets a wide range of demographics to make sure everyone knows, the positive impacts cannabis can have on their lives.
It's so exciting to talk to so many different people from so many different areas. I'm in the financial services area, as you know. Danny and I have spent 4 or 5 hours now, maybe more, talking with each other. And I always find it interesting of what other financial programs are out there, and generally the conclusion is, wow, you really have that. What we wanted to do was help close the loop and make this a very responsible and compliant environment. What are you seeing out there in deference to what we've talked about over the last few weeks?
Yeah, so financial services is just a consideration kind of from the beginning with the industry. As you think about any other industry that's ever existed, and rarely does one of the foundational issues be where do we put our money. So I think cannabis is unique in that sense, and you can imagine the restrictions that poses for consumers that want to purchase it and don't realize they can't use their credit card. Or businesses that are trying to transact, pay their vendors, or receive payment from vendors. How complicated something as simple as financial services can actually be. I think how restrictive it is as well in the space makes it very hard for operators. Even if you're an ancillary company and don't touch the plant, for instance, to raise capital. If you're associated with cannabis. Unfortunately, even as a service provider to the space, it makes it very hard to get small business loans and things like this. So I think it's a major need, and as we discussed, Larry, I've come across multiple people and flavors that have tried to address this subject. And I think most commonly, they lack the foresight into obviously the regulations. And the funniest thing is it's not illegal for a cannabis company to deposit money into a bank. More or less, the biggest challenge is the steps or mechanisms necessary for that bank to accept those funds and remain compliant is so cumbersome and so complicated that it's just not worth it to them. It's no longer economical, and they don't make money on it. So
right. I love when people tell my story for me. That's exactly what we found.
Absolutely.
But beyond that, we didn't want to be just a financial company as banking. So in our first podcast, in our first Bootstrap podcast, we talked about announcing we're going to begin to do lending. Now, one of the problems in this industry is people continuously tell us they can't make it because they can't get enough money to buy inventory and survive. Do you think that adding that into our quiver, into our bag there will be helpful to the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the industry in general, you have to remember, is still very startup. Compared to any other space. We're still in the midst of the .com boom. So every legitimate or licensed operator is still in that startup mentality, and through any business, they're going to experience growing pains, and obviously one of those is growth, which is fantastic. Our business alone has doubled basically year over year since we started. And for a lot of companies, through that growth and to really optimize your business for profitability and things along those lines, does require capital. But I like the eXPO and everything that I understand it as going, not only a one-trick pony, but addressing the financial services needs, offering services like lending, cash management, payment exchanges, things like this. But really, it's the member program that I think was the most exciting for me, is understanding, beyond being a service provider, I think a good service provider also, helps you grow your business, and it's really exciting times, I think.
Well, let's talk credit cards for a moment. All over the country, people are mislabeled as I've seen a spa, a gas station, other
Flower shop.
What's that?
Flower
shop. I even saw a barber shop one time.
There you go.
And a lot of people are taking the course of going offshore. And one of the banking commissioners that I work with said, if you work offshore, you might as well stand at the border at the end of the Pacific or the Atlantic and wave goodbye to your money. So there's no such thing as a merchant code for cannabis today.
Correct.
We batch out for a lot of companies that have credit card processing. Somehow they were able to figure that out. But I'm here today to announce that we are effective immediately, able to have consumer members and business members load their own account with us as the merchant. And then, as we talked about the other day, convert the charge to eXPO credit and immediately pass that credit to the business, so they don't have to wait 2 or 3 days and have 10 or 15% of their money on reserve. How do you see that affecting the industry, both from an immediacy of receiving the cash and in the bump in the amount of sale that they'll receive?
Yeah, so at least from whether it be our consumers, periphery, or even our partners, as we get to work with a lot of the different groups in the supply chain. It's huge. It empowers exponential growth. You're talking the average consumer spends 50 to 60% of their purchases on their credit card. Whether they have the funds or not is more or less irrelevant, and we become a leveraged and kind of credit heavy society. So I think for the cannabis industry, like any other, that's a huge preferred method of payment. To your point, in being able to transact not only the consumer money to dispensaries or product companies, as an example, is a huge value in the sense that today it's a physical cash problem, where I have many of friends that have run out of places to store physical cash.
Amazing.
And it sounds just asinine, but you can imagine, how many more large safes are you going to purchase to store physical paper that unfortunately you cannot use to pay your mortgage.
Right. Or buy a car.
Or buy a car. I mean, one of the early problems of the state is they, of course, had a healthy tax on the industry, but they didn't want to accept, truckloads full of cash for tax payments.
Right.
So it sounds just crazy, but these are some of the challenges faced daily. So I think that's a huge benefit to the industry as a whole.
So let's make another announcement today. Cash is a huge problem. I have witnessed here in Colorado and in other states, California being the largest of the opportunity, tens if not more millions of dollars stacked up in warehouses, vulnerable to fire, theft, and other problems.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those people actually have a bank account legitimately. We understand that some people shadow bank and call themselves something else so they can get a bank account, which is a problem all in itself. We could talk about that another time. But the bank doesn't want all of that cash because they have to file lots of reports, SARs and CTRs, which we are a federal financial institution, and we do that.
Mm-hmm.
So effective immediately, we have made an agreement with a federal licensed armored car carrier to work with the operator, the owner, forensically review where the cash came from, make sure the taxes were paid, and then take it on to the Federal Reserve. On the flip side, there's a lot of money out there that's not been previously taxed, and that would be called black or gray money. We are working with an attorney here in Colorado who used to be a top litigation attorney with the IRS to work with forensics accountants and themselves and file a writ with the IRS to allow a period of amnesty to move the cash in. What would you guess, just a guess, the amount of cash is in a state like Colorado, legal or illegal, that needs to find its way to the bank?
You're easily talking hundreds of millions of dollars in
That's what we
physical cash.
Yeah. So if you know anybody that's interested, we'd be happy
I
to.
surprisingly do.
We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your Hettys program.
Yeah, so Hettys Estate's a private dinner party. We found this will be its third year. It really built for the purposes of just bringing the industry together, providing an avenue where everyone can kind of let their hair down, set down their battle axes. During this event, we're not competitors, we're friends with a mutual goal. And coming from just a few years in this space and seeing the blood, sweat, and tears of the people that are really making this possible, the personal sacrifices they make, in time away from their family, or professional sacrifices, and I mean even the risks they run, where you've got sessions talking about imposing death penalties against operators touching the cannabis plant is just beyond me. So the whole kind of premise of it was we wanted to provide a cool avenue where everyone come together. We wanted it to be fun and something just entertaining and engaging. So we decided to couple it originally with a comedy host. So we've got we roast one of our peers during this event and kind of poke fun at a lucky nominee. The first year was a good friend, Trip Kieber of Dixie Elixirs. And if you know Trip personally and professionally, he was a great one to kick off an annual event. He took it like a champ, and I genuinely liked Trip more and after he was roasted.
Right.
So I think it
he let off that
it had a
stiffness,
humbling effect on Trip, I believe. He later nominated Christian Cederberg, so that was last year. Christian and his partner Brian own Vincente Cederberg, who's one of the largest industry attorneys in the space. Christian as well, took it like a champ and left nothing on the table. And this year we've got Nicole West.
That's going to be quite interesting.
She accepted the nomination and have been working with her this week just to kind of prepare. And this year we decided to follow kind of a panel format. So we've got 6 industry heads that'll be roasting our guest of honor, Nicole. She gets to fire couple shots back as well, so to make sure it's just all around entertaining. And then aside from the comedy roast, we really just want to provide a phenomenal experience, one that encompasses that celebration we're talking about. It's post 420, so during just the entire month of April, it's more or less the Super Bowl of the industry. So you got everyone's going crazy, getting products on shelves, and really getting ready for what in Colorado is a citywide event with a couple 100,000 people. So we'll do fun stuff this year: axe throwing, paintball guns, nitrogen ice cream, virtual reality machines. Just cool stuff like this to entertain and kind of nurture the stewardship and friendship. Just of the industry.
Great idea. Yeah. I'm looking forward to participating.
Absolutely.
Appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely.
So, are you planning on doing that in other cities across the country?
Yeah.
How are you planning on rolling that out?
So in cannabis, I've learned now a few times over again is do what you do it well. Kind of nurture a market or a niche. Make sure it's bulletproof before expanding. As in this space, there's obvious complications in expanding. Right. Until it's nationally legal, I think you'll see that in all capacities of the space. So, it's turning into kind of a private club. We showcase the best the industry has to offer, and the question this year is really the additional services we can offer the space. We're one of the few groups that's not a licensee, so we've got a little bit more capacity and freedom to float within the space. And really longer term objectives are to provide kind of an avenue and a portal of stakeholders, friends that can be a kind of support system to each other.
Sure.
Whether it's to help them identify best practices or inside information on regulations or challenges, as well just a solutions provider and helping curate the best service providers in the industry.
And your personality makes it fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could have a lot of fun.
So speaking of fun, and I feel like I'm full of announcements today.
Yeah.
We talked about credit card processing. We talked about lending. I really like this industry, and I'm participating as a financial institution in numerous industries out there to help where banks don't want to participate anymore. But let's just face it, banking is kind of boring. Right?
Yeah, it can be pretty boring.
Yeah. So in our first Bootstraps podcast, I made the comment that I got interested in this industry because I met a family that were invited to leave New Jersey by the governor because their child had epilepsy. And I witnessed an epileptic seizure right in front of me, and I witnessed a tincture put under the tongue and calm the child down and back to where she was an hour prior. That's what really got me interested in it. But this is not really a movement. This is a culture, right? So what better thing in culture than music, right? So I decided to enjoin weedstream.net into our company to provide music and advertising inside the dispensary. And so now we're going to provide street festivals and party environment every weekend, hopefully twice Saturday and Sunday, hopefully twice a day at different dispensaries to draw crowds, bring them into the location, and support our members in a stronger way. And somehow I'd like to tie that in with your My 420 tours, but what do you think of that concept?
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's I think to a degree the industry, we always say the innovation of cannabis has exponentially outpaced education. It's kind of a cliquey crowd if you're a cannabis consumer in some capacities. Entering a dispensary for a first time can be extremely intimidating
and exhilarating.
Yeah, just depending on.
I remember the first time I walked into a dispensary, I was overwhelmed. First from the fragrance.
Yes.
But second, reminiscing when I was 20.
Absolutely.
Or 18. Right?
Yeah.
So.
It's a kid in a candy shop for sure, and I think from the general public's perspective, We meet a lot of people that just say, cannabis, or, I don't smoke pot. Well, great. That doesn't mean you're not a cannabis consumer.
Right.
And my response is commonly, okay, well, do you have problems sleeping, eating, pain?
That's actually how I enjoy the product. I have some different creams that I use for, I hate to admit it, but it feels like arthritis coming along. And interesting enough, apologize for interrupting you there, my mother was visiting from Florida. She was about, at that time, 81. And she looked at my daughter and said, after brunch, could you please take me to a dispensary?
Yeah.
And we walked in, and she started buying pain creams like they were gone out of style. So you're right. It's not just about smoking or inhaling or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's, the product mix and, things that are, I'd say, progressing from the science aspect of the cannabinoids and things like this are crazy. And the problem is with the restrictions of cannabis, our ability to advertise, inform, consumers, really market products like any others is restricted, to say the least. Some of that in part makes me, just in looking at the history of cannabis, to some degree, you got to believe it's intentional. And unfortunately, I've spoken with a handful of people, well more educated in this sector than myself, but said, Danny, the fact is there's no business in healthy people. And it's sad and unfortunate that kind of the general population's been duped into believing that this is the devil's lettuce, and if you smoke this, you're going to go crazy and do something stupid. Because the majority of our customers are the exact opposite. And I think to your point, as far as festivals or music or culture, or community, it's really the bootstrap guerrilla tactics that are we've proven the most beneficial in bringing consumers into the space, to showing them that it is approachable, it's not scary, and really kind of encouraging that education as far as the overall impact to the community. But I can't tell you how many 3-page handwritten letters we've received of stories like the one you mentioned that brought you in the space of providing a service and education and experience, and then helping a consumer find their need to increase their quality of life. That's what keeps me in the space, is beyond the economic benefits, the just personal benefits that I derive from helping people and making the world a better place. And the challenge is just doing it bigger and badder and faster and stronger. As there's still the majority of our country has no idea what this industry is even about, how it can replace their opiate addictions, how it can supplement their pain treatments, eliminate alcoholism in some capacities. I mean, I think we're only at the beginning of what we'll see this industry produce for really our general public for generations to come. So honored to be a part of it.
Yeah. So let's wrap up. Where do you see the industry in, I always hate this question, 5 years from now, but I'm going to say 2 because it's moving so rapidly.
Yeah.
Every day I see changes occurring. So like in the next 2 years, where do you see things being, where do you see the industry at?
Yeah, I think California for me, just in being in the space now for 5-something years, has been the tipping point. Is California is the 6th largest economy in the world. Okay. So if we do a good job implementing cannabis and regulating cannabis in California, it really proves it's a legitimate and viable market. The economic impacts, the impacts to the society have been immense. We've seen it in Colorado, but by virtue of people, it's a very small segment of the industry. So California, in comparison, they've got some black market issues that they're working out, obviously, but based on the pace in which the industry is evolving, if California continues to implement the way it has, I think it's going to be spread like wildfire across the country. Just based on a handful of markets like Colorado and Washington and Oregon, doing as well as they have and reporting these stats that show the sky didn't fall, the economy's up, opiate deaths are down, these types of statistics you can't fight off paper. And through that, just even in our tour business, we're seeing regulators from across the country, we're seeing politicians from different countries coming here saying, we want this. So I think it's past the point of stopping it. My fear and concern is, now that it's the elephant in the room that has to be addressed. There's a couple ways
So
that
you
could
don't
go.
think the genie is going back into the bottle? Huh?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But it's just watching how the regulations have rolled out. I think there's still a lack of knowledge from our general public and consumers, which are the people represented by the regulators. But without that knowledge base, the regulators are in a position to curve this in a lot of different ways. We've seen this in other economies where sometimes that curve is not within the best interest of the people. And that's my biggest concern, is that this would turn into a Schedule II narcotic and we put in the hands of pharmaceutical companies and would be the opiate problem all over again. Just having kids and seeing how much it costs when my 6-year-old breaks his arm, for an
awful.
X-ray and a wrap to cost $16,000, you're sitting there scratching your head going, how's that possible?
Right.
And then my insurance company paid for it. So that's my biggest, kind of fear for the industry. I'm always cautiously optimistic, but on the same hand, I think if the consumers, knew and experience and understand the various different ways that the cannabis plant in THC as well as hemp can impact society for recreational purposes, therapeutical, medical, economic, industrial. It's probably one of the most rich substances known to man.
Yeah.
That the more people that understand it, get into it. To your point, it was never my intention to jump into cannabis, but once I learned it and understood it, I'll never go back.
Right.
So the interest that the people that the industry is bringing, I think every day is indicative of its growth. And 2 years from now, it's a much different place if we continue our current trajectory. And I think it'll be a staple brand. You'll see we've already heard announcements of alcohol-less THC beer, by the same guys that did Blue Moon. That's a big deal.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that. That's pretty cool.
It's a big deal. So the CBD movement and hemp movement's huge. It's now in a lot of dietary supplements being sold at traditional grocery stores like Trader Joe's, and it's making some insane progress. So I'm very optimistic.
Well, I'm really thrilled that you were one of our very first participants on our Bootstraps podcast. And as we begin to move eXPO beyond Colorado, we're now looking at 7 states, mostly west, a few east. We may have a couple surprises coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But we're finding that these states want to go cashless.
Mm-hmm,
they don't
absolutely.
want any money actually crossing the counter
Mm-hmm.
for a variety of reasons. And I'm looking forward to participating with you as we grow and you grow across the country. So thank you for coming, and enjoyed having you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry.